Inside SASSA's Johannesburg office, a grant administrator creates another ghost, a beneficiary who doesn't exist but will receive real money. Ebenezer Tillahin adds the phantom to the system. Across town, accomplices wait at Shoprite ATMs with stacks of cards. This is how 260 million South African rand vanished from South Africa's most vulnerable citizens. The South African Social Security Agency administers welfare grants for about 28 million people. Before September 2025, the system relied on ID booklets and physical signatures to enroll beneficiaries. No routine digital biometric checks. This vulnerability became a goldmine for criminals who understood how to exploit it. According to investigators, SASSA officials allegedly created fake profiles in the system using stolen or forged documents. Police found 5 passports, ID photos, birth certificates, and affidavits when they raided suspects in Soweto. An Eastern Cape, SASSA audit recovered similar documents stashed in an official's desk. These materials suggest the criminals fabricated or hijacked identities to open accounts at the Department of Home Affairs and SASSA. Each phantom beneficiary became a revenue stream. The officials would register a person who didn't exist, using a fake ID number, a forged birth certificate, maybe a stolen identity document. That ghost would then qualify for grants, child support, disability, old age pensions. Real money flowing to imaginary people. The Cybercrimes Act charges against the suspects suggest they manipulated SASSA's electronic systems. They weren't just filling out paper forms. They were creating profiles directly in the beneficiary database, setting up payment instructions, generating SASSA cards. 7 SASSA employees have been charged in connection with this scheme. Among them is Ebenezer Tillahin, a 29-year-old Ethiopian national who worked as a SASSA grant administrator. But creating the ghosts was only half the operation. The money still had to be extracted from the system, and for that, the insiders needed partners on the outside. On February 4, 2025, 2 women walked into a Shoprite store in the Dlamini section of Soweto. They carried an unusual load, stacks of SASSA grant cards. The checkout workers noticed something was off. These cards were expired, fraudulent, suspicious. The employees tipped off police. When officers arrived, they seized 139 fraudulent SASSA cards from the women and an associate. But that wasn't all. They also found 60 Time Bank cards, 8 FNB cards, and multiple SIM cards likely used for coordinating withdrawals. According to police reports, suspects had been withdrawing cash from 150 to 200 fraudulent cards across Shoprite stores throughout Gauteng before their capture. This was the collection network in action, the foot soldiers of the operation. They would take the cards created by insiders, go to retail paypoints, Shoprite, banks, post offices, and withdraw the grants. Cash out before anyone noticed. Move on to the next store, the next card, the next phantom beneficiary. Prosecutors describe the network as a complex syndicate, coordinating insiders and outsiders. The scheme relied on volume and speed. Investigators noted that the gang cycled beneficiaries' grants. Funds were withdrawn quickly in cash. No actual grant recipient ever saw the money they were entitled to. The choice of Shoprite as a primary withdrawal point wasn't random. It's a popular, high-volume retailer in townships. Large withdrawals wouldn't immediately arouse suspicion from the general public. People expect to see grant recipients collecting money at Shoprite. What they don't expect is the same people collecting from dozens of cards. Police note that 3 members of the public worked hand-in-hand with SASSA officials. These weren't isolated actors. This was coordinated, systematic, a pipeline from the government office to the retail floor. The Shoprite tip-off triggered a cascade of investigations. What started as 2 women with suspicious cards became a multi-provincial fraud probe. On March 14, 2025, South African police conducted coordinated raids. They hit SASSA's central Johannesburg office and arrested 3 grant administrators. But Johannesburg wasn't the only target. On March 4th, investigators had conducted an unannounced audit at SASSA's Idutiwa office in the Eastern Cape. This came after local beneficiaries alerted management about fraud. The audit uncovered unaccounted documents, IDs, birth certificates, stamped letters, in one official's desk. 3 more arrests followed. The physical evidence was overwhelming. Beyond the cards seized in Soweto, investigators found more tools of the trade: multiple mobile phones, SIM cards for coordination, bank cards from various institutions, stamps and official documents that could be used to create more ghost beneficiaries. The multiplicity of cards suggested funds were being systematically drained before legitimate beneficiaries were paid. Transaction records showed withdrawals from fraudulent accounts at various pay points. Each card, each withdrawal, each ghost beneficiary added another count to the mounting charges. By March 17th, when 5 suspects appeared at Lenasia Magistrates Court, the state had filed over 1,000 counts against them. The National Prosecuting Authority later escalated this to over 1,300 counts against the accused. Fraud, theft, and contravention of the Cybercrimes Act. Each phantom beneficiary profile could be charged as a unique case. The investigation methodology combined old-fashioned police work with digital forensics. Investigators matched seized SASSA card serials against the database to trace back to the creating officials. They examined logs from SASSA's client management system to see when and by whom profiles were created. Mobile phone data from the seized SIM cards could reveal coordination calls between suspects. Parliament's Social Development Committee praised the investigation, particularly crediting the whistleblowers. Committee members emphasized that without the Shoprite workers and the SASSA beneficiaries who reported irregularities, the fraud might have continued undetected. 11 people have been charged in connection with the syndicate, 7 SASSA employees, and 4 members of the public. But authorities believe this represents only a fraction of the operation. Police spokesperson Masando said investigators believe the syndicate is much bigger than those arrested. Ebenezer Tilahin emerged as a high-profile defendant. At 29, the Ethiopian national held a position of trust as a SASSA grant administrator. When bail hearings came in June 2025, 9 of the 10 accused were granted conditional bail. Tilahin was the exception. The prosecution argued he posed a flight risk. The court agreed, denying him bail on security grounds. But Tilahin and his co-accused may not be the architects of this scheme. Authorities have warned that an elusive suspect, described as a female SASSA employee, remains at large. Police explicitly state that a mastermind is still free. Those arrested, investigators suggest, were working for a larger ringleader. This tiered structure is typical of sophisticated fraud operations. Low-level actors collect cash at supermarkets. Middle-level facilitators create the bogus accounts. And somewhere above them, coordinators who may never touch the money or the cards directly. The involvement of Ethiopian nationals adds another dimension. While South African nationals comprise most of the accused, the foreign element has drawn attention. A related case from Northwest Province in 2022 involved another Ethiopian businessman, Etebo Lapso Wangore, who attempted to buy 250 SASSA cards from a post office agent for 20,000 rand. He was later arrested and, in July 2025, sentenced to a fine and suspended imprisonment. NPA statements on related cases speak of corruption schemes led by diasporic organizers. But it's crucial to note that the SASSA employees charged, the insiders who made the fraud possible, are South African. This wasn't an external attack on the system. It was betrayal from within, with help from outside. The Soweto discovery was just the beginning. As investigations expanded, evidence emerged of operations across multiple provinces. The simultaneous discoveries in the Eastern Cape showed this wasn't an isolated Gauteng problem. The Idutiwa office raid revealed a similar pattern, fraudulent documents hidden in an official's workspace, suggesting the same ghost beneficiary creation process. Local SASSA beneficiaries had noticed irregular payments and reported them to management. Their complaints triggered the unannounced audit that led to 3 arrests. Forensic analysis showed withdrawals weren't limited to Soweto or even Johannesburg. Suspects had been using fraudulent cards at Shoprite outlets across Gauteng. Bank branches throughout the province had processed withdrawals. The post office system was implicated as another conduit for extracting funds. This geographic spread demonstrates the syndicate's ambition and reach. They weren't content to exploit a single office or region. They built a network that could create ghosts in one province and cash them out in another. The scale suggests significant planning and coordination. The provincial spread also highlights systemic vulnerabilities. If criminals could replicate the same fraud methods in Eastern Cape and Gauteng, what about other provinces? The Auditor General has repeatedly flagged ghost beneficiaries as a nationwide problem costing the state billions. This syndicate may represent just one tentacle of a much larger issue. Each new location meant more victims, more legitimate beneficiaries who went without their payments, more communities where trust in government support eroded. The geographic scope transformed this from a local crime to a national crisis. 260 to 265 million rand. That's what investigators say the syndicate stole from South Africa's social grant system. To put this in perspective, South Africa allocates tens of billions annually to social grants. The stolen amount could have funded hospitals, schools, additional legitimate grants. But this wasn't white-collar fraud where private companies lose millions. This was theft from the poorest South Africans. Each fraudulent beneficiary account meant a real person went without their grant payment, often for multiple months. The victims are the elderly who depend on their pensions for food and medicine, the disabled who need their grants for basic care, the children whose guardians rely on support grants for school fees and clothes. These aren't people with savings to fall back on. For many, the SASSA grant is the difference between eating and going hungry. Beyond the immediate financial impact, the scandal eroded public trust. When accounts come up empty or people's identities are stolen, confidence in government support structures plunges. The Social Development Committee stated that, when corruption thrives in institutions like SASSA, the vulnerable beneficiaries suffer the most. Even those who eventually receive their payments face the hassle of restoring them, proving they were legitimate beneficiaries, dealing with bureaucracy while their bills piled up. The theft created a ripple effect of hardship through already struggling communities. The economic damage extends beyond individual victims. Billions in welfare payouts circulate through the economy as recipients spend on local goods and services. Stolen grant money means less consumer spending at the bottom end, hurting small businesses and townships. The fraud literally extracted money from the communities that need it most and can least afford to lose it. A prosecutor noted that such crimes divert resources intended for legitimate beneficiaries, and thus undermine not just public finances, but also the economy by making poor people even poorer. It's a poverty tax, those with the least paying for the greed of those entrusted to help them. In August 2025, months after the syndicate was exposed, SASSA announced a comprehensive biometric enrollment system. From September 1st, all grant applicants would need fingerprints or facial scans taken on SASSA machines. The system was touted to ensure the right people receive the money meant for them. But the timing tells its own story. The biometric system came after the crimes became public, after 260 million rand had already vanished, after the Auditor General had spent years warning about ghost beneficiaries costing the state billions. SASSA's vulnerability to synthetic accounts was well known but unaddressed. Prior to 2025, the agency largely relied on ID booklets and physical signatures. There was no routine digital biometric check. Criminals could create multiple accounts under fictitious names. The Soweto case proved this wasn't theoretical. It was happening on a massive scale. The new system uses linked databases to prevent duplicates. Fingerprints and facial recognition should, in theory, make it impossible to create ghost beneficiaries. SASSA also tightened controls on card issuance, printing cards on security stock and requiring in-person PIN collection. Yet experts caution that no security system is foolproof. The first phase of biometric rollout began in late 2025, so it couldn't have prevented the Soweto scheme. Moreover, many fraudulent accounts were already in the system, created under the old vulnerable process. Enforcement and audits will remain essential even after biometrics. As one security expert noted, criminals adapt. They find new vulnerabilities. The technology is only as good as the people operating it. If SASSA officials can be corrupted to create fake profiles, can they be corrupted to bypass biometric checks? The Parliamentary Portfolio Committee has discussed amending laws to tighten identity checks and enhance whistleblower protections. The Auditor General is conducting an audit of all SASSA accounts nationwide to gauge the true scale of ghost accounts. But these measures come after years of warnings, after hundreds of millions stolen, after trust has been shattered. The question haunting authorities isn't whether they've stopped this syndicate. It's how many more are out there. Police admit the network is much bigger than those arrested. The mastermind remains free. And across South Africa, in offices and shops and post offices, there may be other ghosts waiting to be discovered. Until there's real accountability, not just for the foot soldiers but for the system that allowed this corruption to flourish, the vulnerable will remain at risk. The Soweto syndicate may be partially dismantled, but the machine that created it is still running. New security measures are being installed, but they're fighting yesterday's war. The criminals have shown they can adapt, infiltrate, and exploit. They've proven that poverty relief can be weaponized against the poor. And somewhere in South Africa right now, the next scheme is probably already underway.